The rhythmic creak of the porch swing was the only sound for Miles, a counterpoint to the distant rustle of leaves. Captain Miles, though no longer a captain of anything but his own quiet hours, watched the clouds drift by, their shifting forms a familiar canvas. He traced the outline of a cumulus, imagining it as a towering mountain range, then a colossal ship sailing across an azure sea. His gaze held a familiar ache, a yearning for the boundless expanse he once navigated with practiced ease. The sky, vast and indifferent, felt emptier now than it ever had when he was soaring through it. A sudden gust of wind stirred the wind chimes hanging near the eaves, a silvery cascade of sound that momentarily broke his reverie. He closed his eyes, and the memories came unbidden, a sensory rush. The roar of the engines, a symphony of raw power vibrating through the cockpit floor. The intoxicating scent of jet fuel and ozone. The breathtaking vista of a sunrise painting the world in fiery hues from 30,000 feet. He remembered the feeling of being an extension of the machine, a sentient part of a metal bird carving a path through the heavens. He'd guided countless souls across continents, through turbulent storms and serene starlit nights, each flight a testament to his skill and passion. The thrill of takeoff, the gentle hum of cruising altitude, the satisfying thud of landing gear kissing the tarmac. These were not just events, but chapters in the grand epic of his life. He opened his eyes, the porch swing still swaying gently beneath him. The clouds above continued their silent journey, oblivious to the history unfolding beneath them. He pushed himself off the swing, a familiar stiffness in his knees. The house, usually a sanctuary, sometimes felt like a gilded cage. He wandered into his study, a room filled with maps, model planes, and framed certificates. His hand drifted to the closet door, his fingers tracing the cool, smooth wood. He pulled it open, revealing a meticulously pressed uniform, its dark fabric a stark contrast to the faded light filtering through the window. The gold braid on the sleeves gleamed faintly, the polished brass buttons reflecting the room's muted tones. He ran a hand over the fabric, feeling the ghost of his younger self in its threads. This uniform had been his second skin, a symbol of authority and freedom. Now, it hung there, a silent sentinel of a life lived, a career concluded. A profound sense of absence settled over him, a hollow space where the sky used to be. He missed the camaraderie with his crew, the sharp crackle of radio chatter, the responsibility that weighed heavy but exhilaratingly on his shoulders. The silence now was a different kind of heavy, a constant reminder of what was no longer. He sighed, a sound that carried the weight of years and unfulfilled longing. The uniform waited, a silent testament to a chapter closed, yet its presence whispered of a sky still waiting, just beyond his reach. A new neighbor and a shared dream. The rumble of a moving truck was the first sign. Miles, stirring sugar into his morning coffee, watched from his kitchen window as a large, brightly painted vehicle lumbered to a halt next door. Boxes stacked precariously began to emerge from its cavernous interior, carried by a flurry of activity. A new family. He hadn't had neighbors with children in years, not since the Miller's kids had grown up and flown the coop, quite literally. Later that afternoon, a small, energetic figure emerged from the newly opened back door of the house next to his. Miles, trimming a rosebush that had seen better days, paused. The boy, no older than 7 or 8, had a bright red t-shirt and even brighter eyes. He clutched a crudely fashioned paper airplane, its wings slightly crumpled from enthusiastic handling. Leo, as Miles soon learned from an overheard conversation, launched the paper plane with a determined flick of his wrist. It soared for a moment, wobbled, then nose-dived into a patch of newly laid sod. Unperturbed, Leo retrieved it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He adjusted a wing, squinted at the sky, and tried again. This time, he added sound effects, a high-pitched vroom that was surprisingly accurate. He ran, arms outstretched, mimicking the swooping trajectory of his imaginary aircraft. His small body dipped and soared, a miniature aviator navigating an invisible sky. He twisted, banked, and even executed a perfect imaginary barrel roll, his laughter echoing across the manicured lawns. Miles leaned on his pruning shears, a faint smile playing on his lips. The boy wasn't just playing, He was flying. Miles remembered afternoons spent in his own backyard, a battered balsa wood glider, his most prized possession, the endless expanse of the blue above his only true companion. He'd close his eyes then, just as Leo seemed to be doing now, feeling the wind on his face, the hum of engines in his mind. The feeling was a familiar ache, a ghost limb of a life he'd left behind. Leo, mid-flight, suddenly stumbled, catching himself before he fell. He glanced around, perhaps feeling observed. His eyes met Miles's across the low fence. For a moment, the boy froze, a hint of shyness replacing his boundless energy. Then, a quick, almost apologetic wave. Miles returned it, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. He watched as Leo, emboldened, launched his paper plane one more time, this time with an even louder, more confident zoom! The paper plane and the boy's spirit seemed to defy gravity. A flicker of something long dormant stirred within Miles, a recognition, a burgeoning connection to a dream he thought was his alone. Stories from the clouds. The aroma of brewing coffee and toasted pastries filled the Maxwell's kitchen as Captain Miles walked in, his presence immediately commanding yet warm. He extended a hand to Leo's father, a firm, friendly grip, then turned to Leo. "You must be Leo," he boomed, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to navigating storms. "Heard a lot about you, young man. Always got your head in the clouds, they say." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes, genuine and inviting. Leo, usually quick with a response, found himself momentarily speechless. This wasn't just any old man. This was the Captain Miles, a legend in the small aviation community. He managed a respectful nod, his gaze fixed on the subtle glint of a silver eagle pin on Miles's sweater. "Don't be shy, son," Miles chuckled, taking a seat at the worn kitchen table. "Pilots are just people who like looking down on things." He winked. "And you, I hear, are quite the enthusiast." Leo's shyness evaporated like morning mist. I read everything I can," he blurted out, a rush of words following. About aerodynamics, flight controls, different aircraft models. I even built a few intricate scale models. My favorite is the Supermarine Spitfire. Such a beautiful design, and its elliptical wing, it's just..." He trailed off, suddenly worried he was rambling. Miles leaned forward, his elbows on the table, listening intently. The Spitfire. A classic. Agile. Responsive. You've got good taste, Leo. Ever wonder what it's like to really feel the air beneath those wings? Leo's eyes widened. "More than anything," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "I dream about it. I sketch new designs in my notebooks, imagine what it would feel like to pull back on the stick, to see the world from up there, to be free." He looked at Miles, a raw, yearning intensity in his gaze. Is it really like that?" Miles's expression softened, a faraway look entering his eyes. "It's more than that, Leo. It's like the sky whispers secrets only you can hear. I've flown through thunderstorms that painted the clouds in shades of bruised purple and angry orange, felt the shudder of the fuselage as the wind tried to wrestle control from my hands. I've seen sunrises from above the clouds, a carpet of fluffy white stretching to infinity, the sun a molten gold disk, and sunsets. Oh, the sunsets. They paint the sky with colors no artist could ever truly capture. Every flight is a story, Leo, a unique chapter in the grand book of the sky." He paused, a wistful smile playing on his lips. "Once I had an engine sputter out over the Rockies. Ice had built up on the carburetor, had to make an emergency landing on a remote airstrip, surrounded by towering peaks. Felt like a tiny speck, but I brought that bird down safe. The silence afterwards, the crisp mountain air, the sheer relief. That's a story I'll never forget." He leaned back, his gaze fixed on Leo. "You want to fly, don't you, son? Really fly?" Leo nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "More than anything, Captain Miles. It's all I've ever wanted." The Skylark's secret. The image of Leo's face, alight with pure wonder during their last flight, had been a persistent flicker in Captain Miles's mind ever since. It was a mirror of his own forgotten youth, a time when the world was an endless expanse of blue waiting to be conquered, he found himself drawn to the far corner of his cavernous hangar, a place usually reserved for forgotten tools and the ghosts of past projects. There, under a shroud of heavy canvas, lay his own secret. Later that week, a crackle on Leo's walkie-talkie startled him from his homework. "Leo, it's Miles. Can you make it to the airfield this afternoon? I've got something special to show you." Leo, still buzzing from their last aerial adventure, didn't hesitate. He arrived to find Miles waiting by a set of imposing, rust-pitted double doors at the back of the largest hangar. The air within was thick with the scent of aged metal and dust, illuminated by a single bare bulb hanging from a high beam. As Miles reached for a heavy chain, a tremor of anticipation ran through Leo. With a groan of protesting hinges, the doors swung inward, revealing a shape beneath a tattered, grimy tarp. Miles, a faint smile playing on his lips, pulled at a corner of the canvas. Dust motes danced in the sparse light as the fabric peeled back, revealing a wing, then a fuselage, then the unmistakable lines of a biplane. It was smaller than the trainer, painted a faded azure with the elegant cursive of "The Sky Lark" barely visible on its nose. Leo gasped, a sound of unadulterated awe. His eyes, wide as saucers, traced every curve, every rivet. "Captain, what is it?" His voice was barely a whisper. "She's the Sky Lark," Miles said, his voice imbued with a reverence Leo hadn't heard before. "My first love, in a manner of speaking. She's been sleeping for a long time." The plane bore the scars of years of neglect. Fabric frayed at the edges, paint peeling like old skin, a propeller blade chipped and dull. Yet, even in its derelict state, it possessed a certain defiant grace. Leo approached cautiously, reaching out a tentative hand to touch a wing strut, then pulling it back as if fearing to disturb its slumber. "She's magnificent," he breathed, a warmth spreading through him that chased away the hangar's chill. He looked up at Miles, his gaze alight with a question that didn't need to be voiced. Miles met his gaze, a glint of something rekindled in his tired eyes. "She needs a lot of work, Leo. A lot. But she flew once, like a dream. And I think—" He paused, looking from the boy's eager face to the neglected aircraft. "I think she could fly again, with a little help." The unspoken invitation hung in the air, a promise of shared purpose, a new adventure waiting to unfold, wings and wrenches. The hangar door rumbled shut, plunging them into a quiet intimacy with the behemoth that was the Sky Lark. Dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight slicing through a high window, illuminating the aircraft's faded silver skin. Captain Miles, with a sigh that was almost a caress, ran a hand over a grimy wing. "She's seen better days, son, but under all this history, she's still got the heart of a bird." Leo, his eyes wide with a reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts, circled the biplane. He reached out, hesitating, then gently touched a strut. "She's magnificent, Captain." "Magnificent and neglected," Miles corrected, handing him a grimy cloth. "First lesson, Leo. A plane is only as good as the care it receives. We start with elbow grease." They worked in companionable silence for a long while, the rhythmic scrub of rags against metal the only sound. Miles showed Leo how to gently wipe away decades of dust from the taut fabric of the wings, how to carefully clean the intricate gauges in the cockpit without damaging them. He pointed out small dents, faded serial numbers, and the subtle warping of wood that spoke of past adventures and hard landings. Leo absorbed it all, his brow furrowed in concentration, asking quiet, insightful questions. "Is this the aileron?" he had asked, pointing to a control surface, his voice hushed. "Indeed it is, lad," Miles would affirm, a warmth spreading through him. "And what does an aileron do you reckon?" Leo would pause, thinking, then burst out, "It banks the plane, changes the roll." His face would light up, a pure, unadulterated joy that was infectious. Miles found himself explaining the intricate dance of forces that kept the biplane aloft. He described the lift generated by the curved wings, the thrust from the propeller, the drag that had to be overcome, and the precise control offered by rudder, elevator, and ailerons. He spoke of the engine as a living heart, the fuel lines as arteries, the control cables as sinews. Leo's gaze never wavered, his mind a sponge soaking up every detail. He wasn't just listening, he was seeing the physics, visualizing the airflow, feeling the controls. "See this linkage here?" Miles demonstrated, pointing to a series of rods connecting the joystick to the tail. "This is how you tell the rudder what to do. You want to turn right, you press the right rudder pedal, which pulls this cable, which pivots the rudder, and the tail swings to the left, pushing the nose to the right." Leo mimicked the motion with his foot, his eyes tracking the imaginary cable. "So it's like steering a boat, but in the air," Miles chuckled, a genuine heartfelt sound. "Precisely, Leo, precisely. You've got a knack for this, I can tell." The boy's eagerness, his quick grasp of complex concepts, was stirring something long dormant within Miles. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed sharing this world, this passion. The Skylark wasn't just getting a cleaning, she was getting a rebirth. And so, in a way, was he. The silent radio. The crisp, morning air hummed with the distant chirp of cicadas as Leo and Captain Miles approached the biplane. The polished struts gleamed under the burgeoning sun, a testament to its careful upkeep. Leo's heart pounded a familiar rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. Today was the day they'd practice the figure eights Captain Miles had demonstrated with such effortless grace. Captain Miles, ever the methodical pilot, climbed into the cockpit first. Leo watched, absorbing every movement, every check of the dials. The old man's fingers danced across the instrument panel, a silent symphony of pre-flight rituals. Then, a sudden stillness. The captain's brow furrowed, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a flicker of concern. He tapped a small black box mounted on the side of the cockpit. The radio. No comforting crackle, no reassuring hum. He tried again, twisting a knob, pressing a button. Silence. He looked up at Leo, his blue eyes clouded with a frustration that went beyond a simple mechanical issue. "Blast it all," he muttered, his voice gravelly. "The radio's dead, not a peep." Leo's excitement deflated like a punctured balloon. He knew the importance of communication, even on short local flights. "Completely dead?" he asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Captain Miles nodded, running a hand over his thinning hair. "Utterly, and without it, we're grounded. Can't risk it, not even for a quick spin." He sighed, a sound heavy with disappointment. The prospect of another grounded day hung in the air, thick and unwelcome. Leo's gaze drifted from the silent radio to the captain's crestfallen face. He thought about the hours they'd spent in the hangar, the captain explaining the intricate workings of the biplane, his own hands growing more familiar with the tools. An idea, tentative at first, sparked in his mind. "Captain," he began, his voice a little hesitant, couldn't we try to fix it ourselves?" Captain Miles looked at him, a glimmer of surprise replacing the worry in his eyes. "Fix it ourselves, Leo? This isn't a bicycle chain. This is a radio. It's delicate, intricate stuff." "But you taught me about circuits, about current flow," Leo pressed, his initial shyness giving way to a surge of determination. "And you always say that knowing your aircraft inside and out is the most important thing. Maybe we could at least take a look, see if it's just a loose connection or something simple." He pointed to the small access panel near the radio unit. "We have the schematics, don't we?" A slow smile spread across Captain Miles's face, chasing away the shadows of disappointment. He studied Leo for a long moment, a new respect dawning in his gaze. "You know, lad," he said, a hint of his old spark returning, "you might just have a point." A beep of hope. Captain Miles squinted at the schematic, the fine print a dizzying maze of lines and symbols. "All right, Leo, hand me the micro-soldering iron, and be careful with that flux. A little goes a long way." Leo, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously picked up the delicate tool. His movements, initially hesitant, now held a newfound confidence. "So the primary capacitor for the frequency modulator, that's what's been cutting out the signal?" His voice was a low murmur, barely audible over the hum of the old workshop fan. "Precisely," Miles confirmed, his gaze fixed on the intricate circuitry. "It's like the heart of the radio, and ours has been skipping beats." He pointed with a slender pick. "See this hairline fracture? That's our culprit." Hours bled into an intense, focused dance of tiny tools and whispered instructions. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of solar and the faint scent of ozone. Leo, usually a whirlwind of restless energy, was a statue of concentration. He held components steady, passed tools with uncanny precision, and even offered suggestions that occasionally surprised the captain with their insight. "Should we test the continuity on that trace before we resolder, sir?" he'd asked once, his eyes glinting with curiosity. Miles had simply grunted in approval, a rare smile playing on his lips. Finally, with a soft click, the last screw was tightened, the radio reassembled. Miles wiped his hands on a greasy rag, a sigh escaping him. "Moment of truth, young man." He reached for the power switch, his heart thrumming a familiar rhythm of anticipation and apprehension. Leo leaned forward, his breath held. The workshop was utterly silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets. Miles pressed the button. A soft, almost imperceptible hum emanated from the unit. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a single sharp beep pierced the silence. Leo gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "It works! Captain, it beeps!" He bounced on the balls of his feet, an enormous grin spreading across his face. Miles let out a booming laugh, a sound that hadn't echoed through the workshop in years. He clapped Leo on the shoulder, a firm, proud gesture. "Indeed it does, son. Indeed it does." He picked up the microphone, the familiar weight comforting in his hand. "This, Leo, is the sound of possibility." Leo's eyes, wide and sparkling, met the captain's. In that shared moment of triumph, amidst the faint aroma of solder and success, the connection between them solidified, a silent promise of adventures yet to come. The beep was more than just a signal. It was a beacon, guiding them toward the open sky. Above the world. The crisp morning air at the airfield bit at Leo's cheeks, a welcome jolt against the nervous tremor in his hands. He clutched the faded baseball cap Miles had lent him, the brim pulled low, not to hide his face, but to contain the wild anticipation sparkling in his eyes. The sky lark, a magnificent polished beast of metal and fabric, gleamed under the nascent sun, its wings stretching towards the horizon like an invitation. "Ready to dance with the clouds, Leo?" Miles's voice, a gravelly rumble, broke through the roar of distant biplanes warming up. Leo nodded, speechless, his throat tight with a mixture of fear and profound joy. The Skylark's propeller, even still, looked impossibly powerful. He followed Miles, clambering into the cockpit. The leather of the seat was cool, then warmed by his presence. A dizzying array of dials, switches, and levers surrounded him, each one a mystery waiting to be understood. Miles strapped him in, the harness snug and reassuring. "All right, all clear," Miles called out, his hands moving with practiced grace over the controls. The engine coughed once, a hesitant breath, then roared to life with a shudder that vibrated through Leo's very bones. The propeller blurred into an invisible disk. The scent of aviation fuel mingled with the metallic tang of the cockpit, a heady perfume. Miles taxied the Skylark onto the runway, the world outside blurring into a streaky watercolor. Leo gripped the sides of his seat, heart hammering against his ribs. The plane paused, then surged forward, gathering speed with an exhilarating rush. The ground fell away, slowly at first, then with astonishing swiftness. Leo gasped, a sound lost in the engine's crescendo. Below them, the patchwork fields unfurled, miniature and perfect. Houses became tiny toy blocks, cars crawled like iridescent beetles. The familiar landscape transformed into an abstract painting, breathtaking in its scale and detail. He pressed his face against the window, a wide, uninhibited grin splitting his face. It's incredible," he shouted over the engine, his voice cracking with pure wonder. Miles, watching the boy's unadulterated delight, felt a familiar warmth unfurl in his own chest. The Skylark banked gently, the horizon tilting, and Leo let out a whoop of joy. For years, flying had been a duty, a skill, a memory. But seeing the world through Leo's eyes, witnessing that raw, unburdened elation, Miles felt the old magic stir. The controls, once an extension of his will, became again a conduit to something deeper, something akin to freedom. He smiled, a genuine, expansive smile that reached his eyes. This was more than just a flight. It was a homecoming. Shared skies, shared dreams. The biplane touched down with a gentle bounce, the grass runway rushing past the open cockpit. The wind, which had been a symphony just moments ago, now whispered through the struts as the aircraft taxied to a halt. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs, a joyful drumbeat echoing the engine's final sputter. He clambered out, his legs still a little unsteady from the exhilaration, and before Captain Miles could even unbuckle, Leo was there, a whirlwind of gratitude. He flung his arms around the older man, burying his face in Miles's weathered flight jacket. "Thank you, Captain Miles," he mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything." The hug was fierce, uninhibited, and completely genuine. It spoke volumes about the awe and pure joy that had just taken flight within him. Miles, a man not prone to outward displays of affection, felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the midday sun. The boy's earnest embrace, the unvarnished appreciation, was more fulfilling than any medal or commendation he'd ever received. Watching Leo's face during their flight, seeing the transformation from curious observer to fully immersed participant, had rekindled a spark Miles hadn't realized was dimming. Sharing his world, his passion, with someone so utterly receptive, so hungry to learn, was a gift he hadn't anticipated. The sky, which had always been his solace, now felt like a shared sanctuary. Over the next few weeks, the hangar became their sanctuary. Miles, with patience born of decades in the air, taught Leo the intricacies of pre-flight checks, the rhythmic thrum of a well-tuned engine, the subtle art of reading the wind. Leo, with his boundless curiosity and sharp mind, absorbed every word, every gesture. He polished chrome, tightened bolts, and learned the names of every component with an almost religious devotion. Their conversations, initially centered on aviation, soon branched into tales of Miles's past adventures and Leo's dreams of the future. The initial shyness that had clouded Leo's demeanor evaporated, replaced by a confident eagerness that Miles found both endearing and inspiring. One blustery afternoon, as they meticulously cleaned the biplane's wings, Miles paused, wiping grease from his hands. "You know, Leo," he began, a rare twinkle in his eye, "there's a small air show coming up next month, just over in Willow Creek. Nothing fancy, but they usually have some interesting vintage planes. Might be a good opportunity to see some other flying machines in action, maybe even talk to a few old-timers." Leo's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "An air show? Really? Can we go, Captain Miles? Can we?" His enthusiasm was infectious. Miles chuckled, a deep rumbling sound. "I wouldn't have mentioned it if we couldn't. And who knows, maybe you can even help me talk shop with some of those pilots. After all, you're becoming quite the expert yourself." A grin spread across Leo's face, bright as the polished propeller blade. The sky was no longer just a distant dream, it was a boundless expanse waiting to be explored, and he had found the perfect co-pilot for the journey.